Learn Accounting Podcast by Professor Accounting, Episode 16, Schedule of Non-Current Assets Intro. So I'll take you through just a brief, as best I can, podcast about this topic, Schedule of Non-Current Assets, and I'll follow up with another podcast, a bit more detailed question being included, certainly an exam standard question. Let's start with an overview of the accounting standards in this case, which typically are applied in a question such as this. So you are preparing a note to the financial statements, so that would involve you considering IAS 1, that would be working there. You are involving PPE, which is the property, plant and equipment, which is stated, you'll see that in a moment, so that's IAS 16 working there. And in some cases, or I say some cases just from thinking myself about this, you could get a question where it does actually involve an impairment as well, impairment of assets, which is IAS 36. So I'm just thinking there you could potentially have it's IAS 1 definitely because it's reporting notes to the accounts, but then IAS 16 and IAS 36, those are typical of this topic as well. You could get a question where it's asking you to state the IASs that are being complied with in a question like this. So always learn, in this case, learn them all, but be able to spot 1, 16 and 36 as well. I'll try and do a podcast on all of these standards at some point as well. So that's the summary of the standards. You do need to know IAS 7. See my previous podcast for IAS 7. I've done 2 of them so far in rather a good amount of detail, because you've got to remember the layouts, and the rest of them in what the exam board says in basic awareness. Able to spot them in operation. So let's get on to this question then. So the question is on the left and my layout is on the right, so you can adapt some layout here. So I've gone for a horizontal layout because I prefer that, but also you've got limited columns that are required. You could easily, in this case, and we've already got PPE, when it's not specified in this basic example as to what is property, what is plant and what is equipment, is all grouped together. So you could get, like it has happened on one occasion in AQA, you could get separate fixed assets, because this is just more of a combined view. So this is again an overview, a start, just to get you interested in thinking about the topic and some of the maths, number crunching as well. So layout here, I've got a typical presentation in this case. We've got net book value at the start, any additions at cost, disposals during the year. I'll mention what that is, whether it's cost or NBV, depreciation for the year, and net book value at the end. So this kind of question, without it saying, so I have given the task, but there's kind of a hidden question in terms of what you're finding out. So you have to prepare a detailed note for the published accounts for the year to the 31st, showing the movement of PPE. And essentially in this kind of question, you actually are finding out the value for depreciation because of the information given. So have a look at this question. Look at the information on the left. Maybe pause the podcast and just dissect and read the information on the left. We've got the directors of Takasuji PLC provide the following balance sheet extracts. So it's for the end of 08 and the end of 09. And you've got values given there in key with thousands as well. So 5,091,000, 4,209,000 and so on. Okay, so have a read of the bullet points, the paragraphs there, and let's see how we would approach this. So what we're doing in this case, we need to plug in the information that we've got. So net book value at the start, we have to prepare this for the end of 09, so the start would be the end of 08, for the beginning of 09. So we've got here, I'm going to use the key as well, so it's 5091. Any additions at cost, so any additions of PPE. So look at the question, we've got here, this is original cost, that's disposals, so it's latent depreciation. So new property price, there we go. So we've got 845. So 845, we'll go in here. Now the disposals column here, as I've done it in this case, and this is typical of a question, then in a disposal, if you start with NBV here and end in NBV, then that's taking into account cost and ACDEP. So if this 5091 here in the key, this is the net book value at the start. So you don't know how much depreciation is at the start and how much is the cost. You just know the net book value. So when you dispose of a fixed asset, a disposal of a fixed asset, you can, in this case, use the same approach, which is the net book value. So let's find, in this case, the net book value on the disposal. So here is the disposal, or disposed. So I can look for the keywords. So the disposal, I'm going to do a calculation, because all we're told in this first paragraph here is we've got the cost, and it was disposed. The depreciation applicable by the end of the year, so it's the fine date, was 480. So we have to do cost, which is 1352, and the ACDEP, which is 480. So if I do minus 480, so we get an answer there of 872. So what is that answer? I mean, that answer in this case, that is the net book value. That's the net book value of the disposal item. So 872 will go in here, so I'll just do a formula. 872 goes in there. However, we need to think about the math side when we come to work it out. The depreciation for the year, that isn't given. No value is given. I'm not giving you a value. I'm not giving you a method. I'm not giving you a rate, anything. So there's no information whatsoever. So treat this then as an unknown value. So if that's an unknown value, you're going to have to find that value like say for algebra, like a missing value. Now the net book value at the end, we do know that. So the end will be the end of 09, so it's 4579. Now we can find this value, and that is the kind of the hidden part of the question. You just have to work it out. You have to complete it. You have to work it out. So that's why it's not stated determine or find the value for depreciation. Obviously it could be said, it could be so specific, but to find or to complete this task, you've got to realize, well, how do you work out depreciation? Well, it's a missing value. So use the values you're given to work it out. So I've got two methods here to show you how to do it. Let's go from left to right and work out the depreciation for the year. So we start with net book value. So net book value at the start. In this case, if we're going forward in time, as in the natural course of time, going ahead, when we buy more assets, that's going to increase the net book value. So we've got a positive, a plus. That's going to increase the by the additions at cost. Disposals. So if it's disposal during the year, then it's going to decrease the net book value. So you're going to minus. Let's do a minus there, and then we've got the disposals during the year. Moves over, and then lastly, obviously in normal course you'd add the depreciation, you plus depreciation, but we don't know that. So all we can do in this case is deal with the net book value. So we can minus the net book value at the end, and we were going to get, and that is our format. So we can now plug in the numbers if you want to do the numbers. So you can put them underneath each other if you want. I'm just going to do it in one cell here. So in this box here, here's that exactly worked out. So net book value at the start is this 5091. Then we're adding the additions at cost, which is 845. We're minusing the disposals, and that's a positive value. So we're minusing that as good. And lastly, we're minusing the net book value, so minus net book value, and we get 485. So 485 is the value for depreciation. So that would go in here as a value. Now, I suppose just to make the maths right here, the 4579. I mean, okay, you're writing, you're not using Excel. Sometimes I probably recommend you put the brackets, the parentheses around this. Another way of doing it is to work backwards. So if we're working backwards in time because you've got this value here, again, you don't have this value if you're working this method out, but let's just prove it works. If you're going backwards, then you could use the net book value at the end, which goes here, and at the net book value at the end, well, this depreciation would have been charged for the year, so it would have been taken off the number to get this number at the end. So you're going to add it back. So if we'd add that number back. Okay, but remember, we're finding that value as an unknown. So skip that. The disposal was minused, so we've got to add it back. So we're adding, and this would be disposals. Add back the disposals. Additions were purchased, which were added, so we'll take them away, which is the opposite. And then lastly, we've got the net book value, so at the start, which was there, so we've got to take it away as well, minus net book value start. So rather than learn these, it's so difficult to just memorize these and learn them. It's just learn the approach, learn how we're rationalizing the approach here. So net book value at the end is there, plus disposals minus additions minus net book value, and we get negative 485. So you get the same answer, but just from the approach you're getting a minus, obviously because of the way we're treating the expense of depreciation. Absolutely, I mean the minus is correct. You can just put your minus in there. I mean in some case in here, when I did this one in the first example with the value, when I just used a formula in there, what I could have done when I did equals, I could have just done minus and then the value, and then this is a minus here. But then when I go down to the box here, and I've done the sign for this value in here, the 872, which is, I think it's D5. I can't minus a minus. I know this is formula and you don't need to use Excel in the exam, but just from a maths point of view, if you're thinking that you put a minus there and then we have to minus that number, well no, we minus the actual number, not the negative number. Otherwise minus a minus is a plus, so that would have to be a positive, and you get 485. And likewise for this one down here, so B5 would have to be a positive. Is it B5? I think it's B. It's not B5, is it? So minus. This is D5, so you have to minus D5 to get minus 485. So look at the approach there in terms of what we're calculating, and in terms of the two ways of working out the depreciation. So mind you, the question didn't say to work at depreciation, it says just to prepare a detailed note in this case, and showing you that basically completing the whole grid in that case, and that means working out depreciation. So a relatively straightforward question. It could, as far as from I knew a few years ago, this could have been, or maybe a year and a half, this could have been a question in an exam for a few marks. Relatively straightforward and short. However, recently there's been a very detailed question on this, and just to give you some perspective, this is a kind of question, or this is a kind of a work solution in terms of a question. I have gone for a horizontal approach as well, just 'cause it's easy to do, and in your work I'll do this one on a podcast for you, but when you're doing it in your work, there's nothing stopping you from doing the vertical or the horizontal. But if you do horizontal, certainly turn your page the other way, landscape rather than portrait, so you can actually fit it on. But by all means, if you give them 3 different assets, then you can put them at the top and do the values down the left side. That's perfectly acceptable. I just prefer this way, given the way that I do it, but I'm open to other options. So I sort of want to go through in this podcast again. So I'll get another this question in another podcast shortly. So I want to thank you for stopping by. Hopefully you find this podcast useful, and I'll see you next time for another podcast from Professor Accounting.